Me and my guild have really enjoyed our time in Pax Day so far. The potential of this game is really incredible. That certainly does not mean it is perfect or there are not areas that could be criticized despite it being an alpha. But despite only being in development for 3 years, I am blown away with what they have already accomplished. This is a review from someone that has played for 1 week. There are reviews out there from people that have been in the Friends and Family Alpha for months, but this is a review from someone that has followed the game closely but only recently was given access. On to the review. As for the good, it is quite simple. The building is fantastic. The crafting and gathering systems are also quite good for such an early state. Sure, there are definitely polish issues. There are quality of life features missing with things like being able to name chests or simply being able to move items once they are built. Overall, I really can't critique anything in the building and crafting systems because of the fact it is alpha. It's on the right track, it needs more work, but the foundation is very solid. We can't say anything yet about combat or PvE despite a rudimentary implementation of it being in the game because we haven't seen the first true implementation of them yet. That being said, I will talk a bit more about combat in a future video, but more of a speculative look at the future of it. PvP is of course not in yet, so I cannot comment there, but again, I will look at it speculatively later. So that's the good of the game covered. Let's talk about the few areas. I do think it is fair to criticize this game right now despite it being an alpha. The reason I think these areas are fair game is because of the long-term design decisions made by the company, and now we can see the early implementation of these design decisions. The first critique is twofold and related to the server stitching and phasing that they have gone with for the server technology. When I first heard of this choice, I had some concerns. I decided to hold off on criticizing it until I did see it. So what are the issues with this? Well, to start with phasing, the current limit per phase is 150 players. Again, the world map is divided into small sections called home valleys and wildlands. Currently, the wildlands are bigger than the home valleys, but each of these discrete areas is its own bespoke server. When you walk between these zones, you seamlessly transition between the two. Now, right now, there are issues that are mostly related to the alpha when you walk between them. Things like auto run turning off, mobs that are chasing you not continuing on to the next server, not seeing people on the next server until you transition over. I think a lot of that will be ironed out in the future. But the current phasing limit of 150 is quite low for such a large piece of land. And that number, they have said, will be increasing by a lot in the future. I think if they could push the phasing limit to 1,000 players or more, that would be pretty solid. Better yet, if they could find a way to get their server tech to the point that they don't even have to phase at all, that would be ideal. But keep in mind, even with all the advancements in server technology, there are still limits. And every MMO ever has had to deal with these limits in some way. Whether they used phasing or some sort of cooling of the number of players visible on your screen, every MMO has used one or the other for the most part, with maybe a few very rare exceptions. So all in all, of the two options, cooling the number of visible players is a better option. But if they can increase the phase sizes to the point of phases rarely ever occurring, that would be fine, I think, as well. The next issue for me is how they have connected the home valleys and wildlands together to limit the areas you can cross between. This was done intentionally to avoid too many server hops happening. Players are currently funneled to specific areas to transition to the next zone. This makes travel distances much longer than they normally would be. The way they have done this is by making the entire map extremely mountainous on the edges of each zone and having a little valley to pass to the next zone. After seeing this, it does make sense why they use the Southwest France region as the inspiration for their world area, as the Pyrenees Mountains are located there. This allowed them to make the server stitching world from a lore perspective. But I do find it makes travel distances much worse on an already massive map, so faster travel options such as mounts are an absolute necessity for this game before launch, and it overall does feel a little off the way you have to navigate. That being said, it is not uncommon for MMOs to have only one or two ways to pass between at least some zones, so it is not completely unheard of. But every single zone being laid out like this is probably somewhat rare for an MMO. My next critique is the semi-procedural world-building approach. When going to different biomes, you see the lack of a handcrafted world, as the placement of the foliage, brush, and grass is all pretty similar. The coloring and textures just kind of change a little bit. So the different zones to me do not feel that different. Again, this is a long-term design decision, so I think it is fair game to criticize it. But I also know that alphas are not where the final polish is done. Eventually, I do think they will go back through these areas and try to make them more distinct and handcrafted. So those are the areas that I think can be safely critiqued, at least from my perspective, because of the long-term design decisions that have been made. A reminder, I did build out a wiki for Pax Dei, but I'm currently way behind on updating it. When I initially started on this project, it was just a project I built locally on my own machine to try to better organize everything for the first everything known about Pax Dei video I made. Eventually I did decide to make it public, but I knew long term I would never be able to keep it updated by myself. And we are already at that point. If you do want to be an editor, join the wiki Discord and make an account on the website. I did give editors that helped me keys to this alpha instead of giving them away on my stream. After I gave them to wiki editors, I gave them to my guild. So if you want a better chance to get in the next alpha test, help edit the wiki or join my guild. And I did set this wiki up as a community wiki. There are no ads or stream embeds like have become commonplace on game wikis these days. Thanks for watching to the end. I appreciate all of you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.